Bose's QuietComfort Ultra. Well, it's a hit, and it hits hard enough to dethrone the Sony WH-1000 XM5 for the most part. The devil is in the details.
Namaste, we're DHRME, dynamic, hilarious reviewers of musical equipment. Before we get to the loud and the quiet, let's start with the comfort.
On the XM5, I never really realized it until I A/B tested it with the Bose QuietComfort Ultra. But on the XM5, I could feel the headband on the crown a lot more. On the Bose, I didn't feel it at all. And another thing is that the Bose's ear cups are roomier than the Sony.
Now, Bose is more clampy than the Sony, and it's not by much, and you would think that it's not a big deal, but this small difference gets magnified over time. I prefer the Bose for the crown and the Sony for the ears. Why can't things be easier?
I'm gonna have to take a different take on that because I like the Bose. Sony, yes, it does feel a lot lighter overall on your head, but the Bose is cozier. Because of that clamping force, it just feels like it's hugging your head and ears a lot more, and I enjoy that feeling more than it being very light and all over the place like it is on the Sony.
Now, coming to active noise cancellation or ANC, Bose clearly eliminates more sound. Even things like typing sounds are eliminated, which is awesome. And you know, if we were giving tier ratings, which we are, we'd give it a tier S. It's excellent. It does an amazing job at cutting out the low end, even better than the XM5. And some of the higher end mids are let in, but not much. Having said that, Sony is still in tier S. Pretty good active noise cancellation all around, but it certainly doesn't hold the crown anymore.
Bose does have this louder white noise or hiss sound, which is a bit fatiguing for longer periods of time. Here's a short recording of the white noise samples. What is pretty cool is that the Bose also has a wind noise reduction mode. But in order to do that, you'll have to get into the app and enable it. And what I could do was save it as a separate mode, a lifesaver in a country like the Netherlands while I'm biking out in the wind. Sony doesn't need this mode because it does pretty decently in the wind already on just the ANC.
From ANC to transparency, Bose QuietComfort Ultra. Again, the winner for transparency, tier S. It's loud and all frequencies are let in. Incredible and very close to not wearing headphones at all. AirPods Max is probably still king, but these give them a run for their money. And the Sony, it's a tier A. You clearly notice the difference. It's not as natural and more of the low end seems to be cut out. All the same, it is still tier A. It's not terrible and I've used it for conversations quite often. Doable, but it is not in the excellent category.
Alright, on build quality. The Bose is foldable and hence you will have a smaller footprint in terms of the case. Everything used to be foldable before. Then Bose came out with the 700 and went to non-folding and everyone kind of copied it. Now Bose is back to being foldable. Unless you consider the QC Ultra to be a successor to the foldable QC series and not the 700. Alright, we digress. There were two triggers for our OCD though. The headband is not easy to adjust when it's on your head. It's really a two-hand job. And the second reason for our OCD acting up is that there are no ratchets on the headband like you used to have on the QC45 and 35. Then there's battery life. Bose advertises 24 hours with ANC on, and we got just under 30 hours, which is great. And on the Sony, they advertised 30 hours, we got 32. So both are definitely exceeding expectations and both are good enough. They're not anything crazy. There are definitely headphones out there that get twice as much, but this is plenty for most use cases, including ours.
I have a question. Why doesn't Bose offer an extra button? What is with this long press and single press idea? I mean, these are the Ultra headphones, right? Did they run out of money to make another button? So to switch modes, ANC modes, you have to press the play pause button down for a couple of seconds. And you may think this is not a big deal. Why is this guy whining about it? And you're right, I am complaining about it. The reason is if you're on a bike, as we often are here in the Netherlands, you just have like about a second to switch modes. And instead of doing that, you're kind of biking, looking around, pressing it down for 2 seconds. Not as much fun. Now going to volume controls, both of these have decided to use touch for volume controls. And if you know anything about us, we don't like the touching on headphones. So Sony uses touch for forward and back, track skipping on the side panel, whereas Bose is using a smaller surface area which is kind of dedicated to the right thumb. Now over time we've gotten used to the Sony, but at the end of the day, I would have just liked something more tactile like the AirPods Max volume control. And it's not just, form over function, because there is way more fine-grained control you can have over volume with the AirPods Max volume dial rather than these touching and swiping. With swiping, it's always a bit of a guess. A big swipe increases volume more than a small swipe, and how much that is kind of a gut feel thing. Now, Sony does have a small edge on volume control. Not many people know this, so listen up. You can swipe up and keep your finger held down, and the volume is then increased or decreased in small increments till you take your finger off. That is a really cool feature that not many people know about, so here you go, free tip for you. Bose did not do that. One swipe is one change.
Let's get to how these do on phone calls, but why don't you go listen to the popsicles, icicles, and test it.
Popsicle. Ice. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Sony was clearly better, not only in noisy conditions, but also for the wind. Bose adds a little more top end to the voice, but also lets in loud noises. In quiet conditions, both should be good. On the Fuckman controls, it's looking decent. You can change ANC mode while you're on a call, and the volume controls work as well. There's unfortunately no way to mute the microphone from the headphones themselves. You'll have to get your phone for that.
It's not just what you hear though, it's also about what you see. And in terms of design, both are very understated in the black color here, and both the blacks are shiny as Both the blacks are shiny oil magnets, and I don't mean they're oil and gas billionaires, but they just attract a lot of oil. Funny story, I actually kept the Sony XM5 in my backpack with a bottle of mustard oil. Don't ask me why, but the bottle of mustard oil leaked out, and I wiped these headphones down really well. But what I noticed the next day was there was oil coming out of the buttons, around the buttons, and that has been happening for the last month. So every time I use this, I get a little bit more mustard oil on my hands and my ears. But hey, the upside is that my ears and hands are super well moisturized in this cold winter. Bose has the classic, smaller hard shell case, but putting it back in the case, it's a bit intense. It's like, solving a Rubik's Cube.
And from multicolored Rubik's Cubes, we're looking at 3 colors on both of these headphones. You got the Bose coming in at sandstone, black, and white smoke, and the Sony comes in black, midnight blue, and silver. And there's also an audio cable included in the box, so you can use it wired if you like. And speaking of wired audio, let's move to sound quality. Let's talk about how the Bose sounds first, and then we'll do a quick comparison with the Sony. Bose has gone down the Qualcomm route and leans on aptX adaptive, whereas the Sony supports its own LDAC codec. LDAC supports higher bitrates, but aptX adaptive promises to be more stable. And yes, the Ultra supports aptX lossless for phones that support it.
The bottom line on the Base QC Ultra is that they have a bass-forward, warmish sound which is spacious, which works great for EDM and hip-hop. For example, Bjork's Hollow 16-bit remix can make the inside of your ears vibrate and maybe even your brain. And I'm pretty sure I have a concussion from listening to that song on these headphones. In Marian Hill's Breathe Into Me, the bass competes with the vocals a bit too much for me. And this is interesting because this doesn't happen in a track like Billie Eilish's I Think Therefore I Am, because the vocals have been EQ'd in such a way that a lot of Billie's voice lives in the higher frequencies too. So when you say bass and vocals always contradict, it really depends on how it's mixed and what voices we're talking about. But classic recordings will have a recessed mids issue. Now the treble isn't fatiguing, just how I like it, but sometimes it's too understated and not sparkly enough for me. But I'd rather they err on this side than, going full sibilance.
Good news! You get a 3-band EQ, and you can adjust each of these from -10 to +10, with 0 being the default. You get 4 presets from Bose, but the bummer is that if you find a preset you like, you can't save it. So what's not good? Well, that bass is very dominating. The bass sometimes lasts just a bit longer than it needs to, but doesn't sound like a torn piece of paper flapping in the wind at higher volume. For the most part, these headphones are excellent. Stuff sounds very realistic, and though the bass could be a bit more refined, overall these sound quite good if you like the bassy sound signature.
Now these headphones already sound plenty spacious to us. Busy music with instruments sound not very crowded. Look, maybe you like spatial audio, maybe you don't, but we are fans of the immersive audio implementation on these. I mean, it's spacious even without immersive audio, but once you enable it, immersive audio, it really adds a great listening experience, unless of course you're looking for like pinpoint accuracy. I found that the bass got a bit thumpy and less sub-bassy and less present, and the treble is also a bit spiky in parts. It's overall not too bad. Some other spatial audio implementations mess up the sound signature completely, but this is something I'd gladly use to change up the sound experience, especially for those very, pan stereo recordings that have Dolby support like this. The head tracking is okay. It is not as instant as the AirPods Max. You know, when you move your head, you immediately feel like the music is following you. It's not that accurate, but it does a decent job as long as you're not moving around too much. Okay, so how do these compare to the Sony? Well, first off, it's not every day that we say that the Sony WH-1000 XM5 has the less bass heavy tuning out of the box. And the Sony goes to ANC, the bass is a bit lower and, you know, a bit straighter on the graph, as you can see, as opposed to when ANC is on. And you know, I'm not a bass hater, but I found that Bose's bass interfered with the mids a bit too much. So a -4, +4 and +3 on the bass, mids and treble gave me a sound signature I kinda enjoyed for rock and metal. Overall, I think both these headphones have their strengths and weaknesses, but on balance, I'd prefer the Bose for sound because it just sounds a bit more spacious, and when there are songs like Bulbs, Fuff, Redux, which have a lot of instruments playing, the Bose does a better job not sounding crowded. But you really have to work at it. And do note that the Sony, to my ears, isn't really far behind or bad. You get more customizability with a 5-band graphic EQ, better presets, ones you can actually save, and a clear bass slider.
And as if that wasn't enough, here are some samples from recordings using binaural microphones for both these headphones. They should give you an idea. Of course, it's not the same as wearing the headphones, but should get some sort of indication of how they sound. We will have full samples of all genres available as usual for our YouTube members and patrons of Icicle tier and above. Enjoy.
I ain't looking at the clock, still ballin' like Rock. Yeah, I'm headed to the bus, then I'm ballin' like
Alright, what are some of the extra features you get? Well, luckily on both the Sony and the Bose, you get multi-point support, so you can stay connected to 2 devices at the same time. In the app, you get a device list, so you can see all the devices you're connected to and switch connections as well. And to top it off, you can pull a connection from a previously paired device on both of these headphones. Excellent multi-point support. And a nifty feature on the Bose is that you don't actually need to power the headphones off. You can just take the headphones off and they automatically go into standby mode and then shut down later. The Bose Music app is good when it works, but often if you're doing something in another app and then come back to the music app, it decides to reconnect. Very unreliable. Although once you set it up, you almost forget it. I mean, the app. It's simple and offers all the basics, so it's very unlikely you'll be hopping in there very often.
Bose has Google Fast Pair, but pairing is sometimes annoying with the app not recognizing the headphones that are already paired using Bluetooth. So overall, for the pairing and general user experience, Sony wins. Sony also has a problem, and that is what we call feature vomit. They have way too many features organized in way too many swipes and tabs, but at least you have them, and if you spend some time, you can use the app and it works every time. Both also have a wear sensor to automatically play or pause your music, and on the Bose, you can also answer calls by wearing them, which is a nice feature. The Bose, interestingly, has that feature where you can hear the device it's connected to when it starts up, and that is super clutch, especially for someone like me who keeps switching devices. I know if it's connected to my phone or my work laptop or my personal laptop or my other phone, or we've reviewed a lot of phones. Check out those videos. But the Sony's 360 reality audio is proprietary, whereas you can use Bose's immersive audio mode without having any kind of special source.
Alright, to buy or not to buy. Let's get one thing out of the way first. Pricing. There's a huge difference if you're in the US or you're in the Netherlands, in Europe like we are. Over here, the Bose costs 500 euros and the Sony you can get for 350. In the US, the difference isn't so stark. The Bose costs 430 US dollars and the Sony 400. Now, having said that, Rohan, what would you pick?
So, what's my pick? Well, Sony is comfortable, and overall I've had very good experience with it, using it for so long. I find that they're very reliable, they work every time you need them to. The ANC is good enough, and sure, it's not as good as the ANC or the transparency on the Bose, but for me, I've used these for about a year and I'm fine with them, because at the end of the day, wireless ANC headphones are a convenience product. They're not an audiophile product where you're just, sitting down in your anechoic chamber and listening to music. And it's something has more uses than just sitting down and listening to music. And even though, these are maybe not as comfortable for many people, for me, the lower clamping force of the Sony and the better microphones just seal the deal. Bose might come into consideration when the price changes, but if you were to ask me which one I would buy, or someone else would ask me that, I'm still saying Sony.
And I've been a Bose guy and a huge fan of the previous QC series for their comfort, noise cancelling, and microphones. The Ultra is a tough one just because of how expensive it is. At least here in the Netherlands, 150 euros is no joke. In the US, the difference is much smaller. If I was in the US, I'd pick the Ultra hands down. So much is similar on both for me, but the difference for me lies in that amazing transparency quality and being able to go about my business without removing the headphones. And I love the smaller case footprint for portability. But because I'm not in the US, I'll be more than happy with the Sony XM5s. You've been ultra interested in these headphones?
And we've been DHRME.
Dewey.
Both the blacks are shiny as fanky-dipping.
I'm always struggling to find out if both my headband sides are equal or not, and if they're not, what does that make me as a person? Am I imbalanced? I don't know. Help. Obstacles, icicles, and Tessa's latest podcast. Who's Tessa? Listen to our podcast.